You know that moment when the last kid finally moves out and the house just feels different, quieter, bigger? You walk past 3 empty bedrooms on your way to make coffee, and some part of your brain starts doing math. This place is too much for us now. Maybe it's time to sell. Maybe it's time to downsize. And if you've had that thought, you're absolutely not alone. Honestly, it's probably the single most common piece of retirement advice out there. Sell the big house, buy something smaller, pocket the difference, live off the extra cash. It sounds clean, it sounds responsible, it sounds like exactly what a smart, disciplined retiree would do. Financial articles practically treat it as a formality, a box to check somewhere between retire and relax. My name is Rick, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, retirement, and why some people seem completely relaxed about their finances while others worry about every dollar. And here's the thing about downsizing. When I actually sat down and ran the numbers for people, not the simple version, the real version, with taxes and interest rates and moving costs all included, something surprising kept happening. Again and again, the math didn't support the move, not even close in some cases. So today, we're not talking about whether downsizing is good or bad in some abstract sense. We're talking about why a growing number of financially savvy retirees are looking at that obvious advice and quietly deciding to stay put instead. And once you see the full picture, in a way, you might start questioning whether the house you already own is actually one of the smartest assets in your entire retirement plan, not the liability everyone assumes it is. Let's start with the part almost nobody talks about, because it's the part that quietly wrecks the whole plan before it even gets started. Everyone assumes selling a house and buying a smaller one just works. You sell high, you buy low, you keep the difference. Simple, right? Except selling a house isn't free. Realtor commissions alone typically run somewhere in the 5 to 6% range of the sale price. On a home worth several $100,000, that's tens of thousands of dollars gone before you've even started packing boxes. Add closing costs, add moving expenses, which, funny enough, people always underestimate, especially if you're hiring movers instead of doing it yourself at 70 years old. Add the cost of fixing up the old place so it shows well, because buyers today are picky, and a house that hasn't been updated in 20 years often needs paint, flooring, maybe a new roof before it even hits the market. Add the new home's closing costs on the buying side too, plus inspection fees, plus title insurance, plus the inevitable, while we're at it, purchases, new furniture that actually fits the smaller space, a smaller couch, smaller everything. By the time you tally it all up, a meaningful chunk of that extra cash you were counting on has already evaporated. And that's before we even get to taxes, which, honestly, is where things get really interesting. Here's a myth worth busting right now. A lot of people assume that because they're retired, they're somehow shielded from capital gains taxes on their home sale. Not automatically true. There's an exclusion, sure, a few $100,000 depending on your filing status, but if you've owned your home for decades and it's appreciated significantly, you can blow right past that exclusion and owe real capital gains tax on the overage. For someone who bought their house 30 years ago in a fast-growing area, that tax bill can be shockingly large. Suddenly, the extra cash from downsizing story looks a lot less impressive on paper. Picture a couple who bought their home decades ago for a modest sum, watched it triple or quadruple in value, and now find themselves facing a tax bill they never planned for, right at the exact moment they thought they'd be pocketing a windfall. So that's mistake number one in the simple version of the math. It ignores how much friction there actually is in moving, and how much of that profit gets quietly siphoned off before it ever reaches your bank account. Now let's talk about something that catches even careful planners completely off guard: property taxes. In a lot of places, your property tax bill isn't really based on what your home is worth today. It's based on what it was worth, or what you paid years or even decades ago, with modest annual increases layered on top. If you've lived in your home a long time, there's a decent chance you're sitting on a property tax bill that's dramatically lower than what a new buyer would pay for that exact same home today. That locked-in assessment is a hidden benefit that's easy to forget about, because it never shows up as a line item anywhere. It's just quietly saving you money every single year. Here's the part that trips people up. When you sell and buy a new place, even a smaller one, your property gets reassessed at current market value. That smaller, simpler home might have a purchase price lower than your old one, but the property tax bill can end up being higher than what you were paying before. I've seen retirees genuinely shocked by this. They downsized specifically to reduce expenses, and their monthly housing costs barely moved, or in some cases actually went up. One retired couple I heard about sold a house they'd owned for over 25 years, moved into a condo roughly half the size, and ended up paying more in property taxes annually than they had on the much larger home. Half the space, same or bigger bill. That's not a hypothetical. That happens constantly. Think about that for a second. You sold your paid-off, larger home, took on moving costs and taxes, and ended up with a smaller place and a similar or higher tax bill. That's not exactly the financial win the brochure promised, is it? And this brings us to what might be the biggest, most overlooked factor in the entire downsizing conversation: your mortgage rate, or more specifically, the absence of one. A huge number of retirees today either own their homes outright or are carrying a mortgage locked in at a historically low interest rate from years ago. That locked-in rate is quietly one of the most valuable financial assets a retiree can hold, even though it doesn't show up on any net worth statement. Here's why. If you sell that home and buy a new one today, you're financing at whatever the current rate happens to be, and depending on the market, that could be dramatically higher than what you were paying. Let's make this concrete. Imagine a retiree who owes a modest remaining balance on their home at a low fixed rate locked in years ago. Their monthly payment is manageable, predictable, comfortable. Now imagine they sell, take their equity, and buy a smaller condo, but finance even a portion of it at a much higher current rate. Despite buying a cheaper home, their new monthly payment can end up close to, or sometimes even above, what they were paying on the bigger house. Smaller square footage, similar or higher bill. That's the trap. And it's not a small trap either. Over a 15 or 20-year retirement, the difference between a low locked-in rate and a fresh high rate can add up to tens of thousands of dollars in extra interest, money that could have gone toward travel, grandkids, healthcare, whatever actually matters to you. This is the part that genuinely surprises people because it flips the entire narrative. The big house with the old low rate might actually be the cheaper option on a monthly basis, even though it looks like the less efficient choice on paper. Funny how that works. The spreadsheet says one thing, the bank statement says something else entirely. Let's actually walk through a realistic scenario, because numbers in the abstract only mean so much. Imagine a couple, we'll call them the Millers, purely hypothetical, nothing about a specific real person, just a composite of situations I've seen over and over. They bought their house decades ago. It's paid off. Property taxes are low because of that old assessment. No mortgage payment at all. Their only ongoing housing costs are insurance, maintenance, and utilities. And honestly, those costs are fairly predictable year to year. Now picture the Downsize version of their story. They sell the house, pay the commission, pay the capital gains tax on the appreciation above the exclusion, cover the moving costs, and buy a smaller condo. That condo gets reassessed at today's market value, so the property tax is actually higher than what they were paying. They finance a portion of the purchase because even after all that equity, they don't want to drain every dollar into the new place. And that financing comes at a rate several points higher than anything they'd seen in decades. When you add the new mortgage payment to the new higher property tax bill, their monthly housing cost in the smaller, simpler condo ends up roughly comparable to what they were paying before, sometimes slightly more. Meanwhile, they've handed over a 5-figure chunk of their net worth in transaction costs and taxes just to get there. Now picture the version where the Millers simply stay. No commission, no capital gains bill, no reassessment, no new mortgage at a higher rate. Their housing costs stay exactly as predictable as they've always been, and their equity stays intact, quietly growing, available if they ever need it through a home equity line or a reverse mortgage down the road. Same family, same financial starting point, wildly different outcomes depending purely on which door they walked through. That's the comparison nobody puts on a slide at a retirement seminar. It's not flashy. It doesn't come with a tidy, sell high, buy low slogan. But when you actually run both scenarios side by side, staying often comes out looking like the far more disciplined, far more strategic choice, not the lazy or sentimental one. Okay, let's shift gears for a moment, because not everything here is about spreadsheets. There's a human cost to moving that deserves just as much attention as the financial one. Think about everything wrapped up in a long-term home. It's not just square footage. It's the neighbors who check in on each other. It's the walking route you know by heart. It's the doctor's office 15 minutes away that already has 30 years of your medical history. It's the community, the routine, the sense of familiarity that becomes more valuable, not less, as we age. There's also something quietly reassuring about knowing exactly where the fuse box is, which floorboard creaks, which cabinet sticks. That kind of deep familiarity reduces stress in ways that are easy to dismiss until you actually lose it. There's actual research connecting social isolation and disrupted routines in older adults to real declines in both mental and physical health. Uprooting yourself from a place where you have deep social connections and moving somewhere entirely new, maybe even a different city to be closer to family, can unintentionally create isolation instead of solving it. New places don't come with instant friendships. Building that kind of community again, later in life, is possible, sure, but it's genuinely harder than people expect it to be. You're not 25 anymore, meeting people through work happy hours or roommates of roommates. You have to actively build a social life from scratch, and that takes energy that not everyone has in unlimited supply. I'm not saying moving is always the wrong call emotionally. Sometimes it absolutely is the right one, especially if the current home has become genuinely unsafe or unmanageable. Too many stairs, too much upkeep, too far from family who could actually help in an emergency. Those are real, legitimate reasons to move, and no spreadsheet should override genuine safety concerns. But when the financial case for downsizing is weaker than advertised and the emotional and social cost is real, the combined picture starts to look very different from the simple sell big, buy small, save money story everyone assumes is true. It's worth asking yourself honestly which category you actually fall into. Are you considering downsizing because the home genuinely no longer fits your needs? Or are you considering it because someone told you that's just what responsible retirees do? Those are two very different conversations, and only one of them is really about the house. So if selling isn't automatically the smart move, what is? This is where it gets genuinely interesting, because the house itself, the one you already own, can still work for you financially without you ever having to leave it. Home equity doesn't have to mean cash sitting there uselessly. There are ways to access that value while staying put. A home equity line of credit can provide a flexible buffer for unexpected expenses without disturbing your day-to-day life. For older retirees specifically, a reverse mortgage, used carefully and with full understanding of the terms, can convert home equity into usable income while you continue living in the home you already know and love. These aren't right for everyone, and they come with real trade-offs worth researching carefully, including fees and how they affect what you eventually leave behind. But they represent an entirely different way of thinking about that big paid-off house. Not a burden to offload. An asset that can still work for you, quietly, in the background, without uprooting your entire life. There's also a quieter option that a lot of people overlook entirely, simply staying. Keeping the low property tax basis, keeping the low or non-existent mortgage payment, and treating your home as one of the most stable, predictable line items in your entire retirement budget. In a retirement plan full of variables you can't control, like market swings and inflation and healthcare costs, a paid-off house with a locked-in tax rate is refreshingly, almost boringly, predictable. And in retirement planning, boring and predictable is often exactly what you want. Some of the retirees who feel most relaxed about money aren't the ones with the biggest portfolios. They're the ones with the fewest surprises waiting for them. There's one more angle worth mentioning, and it rarely comes up in these conversations. Renting out a room, or even part of the home, can turn that too big house into a source of income rather than a drain on your savings. It's not for everyone. Obviously, sharing space takes a certain kind of comfort with other people, but for those open to it, it can quietly solve the too much house problem without touching the equity, the tax basis, or the mortgage rate at all. So where does this leave us? The truth is, downsizing isn't automatically wrong, and staying isn't automatically right either. What's wrong is treating it like an obvious, no-brainer decision without actually running the real numbers. Transaction costs, capital gains exposure, property tax reassessment, the mortgage rate you'd be giving up, the social and emotional cost of starting over somewhere new. Once you add all of that into the equation, plenty of smart, financially disciplined retirees are looking at their current home and realizing that staying put isn't settling, it's strategy. If there's one thing I hope you take from this, it's that everyone does it is not the same thing as it's the right move for you. Run your own numbers. Talk to someone who actually understands your local property tax rules and your specific mortgage situation. Get a real estimate of transaction costs before you assume there's a windfall waiting on the other side. And give yourself permission to ignore the conventional wisdom if your own math tells a different story. Nobody else has to live in the house, and nobody else has to live with the financial consequences of the decision. That part is entirely yours. If this got you thinking differently about your own home and your own retirement plan, that's genuinely the whole point. Hit like if this was helpful, subscribe if you want more honest, no-nonsense conversations about retirement and money, and drop a comment letting me know whether you're planning to stay put or make a move. I read every single one. And honestly, some of the best insights in these videos come straight from you. Thanks for spending this time with me, and I'll see you in the next one.